Youorns. Greetings, fellow Watford fans. Omar here, and it's time for the YouOrns 10-minute take on Watford versus Ipswich. Watford 1, Ipswich 2 was the final score at the Vic last night. Watford got off to a really good start in this game, and one of the things that I had been thinking about here prior to this game was Watford needed to score first and get off to a good start, and then consolidate their game and go on and try to add another goal. And when Watford got the first part of that correct, but they never did get to the second part, as Ipswich Town settled into this game, offered some threats, and also, really, without playing that well, still managed to get 3 points out of Vicarage Road. And that's not just because Ipswich are a very good team. They now sit top of the table before Leicester City play tonight. It's also because Watford really did hurt themselves in this game, and Watford threw this game away. I think if Watford, this men's first team, has to be honest with itself, it will look in the mirror and say that they threw away a marvelous opportunity to make a statement out of this game. This would have been a big statement win for Watford had they been able to get that win, but they did not. After just 12 minutes, Yasser Asprilla, who really has grown into that starting role on that right side of that front three, made a really good impact in this game. Rajovic, who has been misfiring a lot lately, did it again. And the rebound came to Asprilla, who just absolutely hammered it home into the top left-hand corner of the back of the net for the Ipswich net, giving Watford a very important 1-0 lead. Now, Watford, I think, had a few more chances, but Ipswich showed you warning signs and showed this Watford team a lot of warning signs about the vulnerability and openness of Watford's defense. Watford did not defend well in this game, and they did not game manage well, and that really is those are the big reasons why Watford lost this game. Watford were just 12 minutes later pegged back to 1-1 when Hurst scored for Ipswich, and really it was out of nothing. On transition, there was a lack of defending and defensive intensity. Jamal Lewis, who started the game very well for Watford yesterday, did not get tight enough to his man, and it was just oh so easy for Ipswich to score. And Ipswich exposed Watford's frailties in defense and really should have gone on and scored a second goal soon after that, but the goal was disallowed for a foul, and really the foul was very soft to me. So Ipswich really should have been up 2-1 even before they got that second goal, which would come later on in this game. But Watford still performed well in this game. I thought Watford played well in terms of the way they went forward, but the problem was their end product let them down again, as it did on Saturday against Southampton. There were opportunities for Watford to score in this game, but they did not hammer them home. Kayembe had a really good chance. He did not make that count. As I said, Rajovic had an opportunity. He didn't make it count. And I think there was at least one other player who had an opportunity who didn't make it count for Watford. And so Watford looked good. They moved the ball, I thought, pretty well, moved it quicker than they normally do. And I thought they looked very confident in possession. They weren't unsure of themselves. They were very steady, composed. But again, it was that final ball and that final bit of end product that let them down in the game. But otherwise, I thought that they had a game plan. I thought that they played well and they matched Ipswich. At times, I think they played better than Ipswich. In fact, a lot of times in this match, I thought Watford dominated and controlled the game, controlled the tempo of the game, controlled the manner in which the game was being played. Jake Livermore seemed to have things under control in midfield when he was returning, of course, to that central defensive holding place that he is so good and adept in. And I thought that Kone was very quietly good in this game. Had a quiet night, but I thought he was quietly very effective. Kayembe making noise as well. But again, the end product wasn't there when it was desperately sorely needed from this Watford men's first team. However, there were good players on the pitch for Watford. I think everybody put a shift in really in this game, but you've got to look at some players I thought were particular standouts for Watford despite the defeat. And I'll get to that second Ipswich goal in a moment. Look at the likes of Asprilla, who, as I said earlier, has grown into that starting role, looks very comfortable in it, looks very confident in it, and has a bit of leadership in him as well. Just the 19 years of age, I think he is, and he has shown you leadership. He's taken the game on, and he's showing, I think, that he is someone who can be relied upon now to start reliably and often on an everyday basis in this Watford men's first team side. You look at him, you look at Ryan Andrews. I thought he had a very good game last night. Vigorous play from him. I like Jamal Lewis. At least he started the game well before he decided, or for whatever reason, had these defensive lapses that weren't good. You cannot give so much space away to Ipswich or any team, but a team that's two in the league, number two in the league at the minute, and at the very moment that I record this, they are currently at top of the table. You can't give that team that kind of freedom. I think Watford reverted to some of those bad habits, giving up a lot of real estate to Ipswich, showing them a bit more respect than they really actually should be shown, a bit too much respect. And so Jamal Lewis, who started the game well, began to kind of fade off in his defensive duties. I also thought that if you want to look at some players that did well, I did like the spirit of Ken Sema, especially Sema was excellent in this game. Probably Watford, and not probably, he was Watford's best player. He brought in some very dangerous crosses. He has some good attacking intent, very lively. I thought his energy level was higher than pretty much everybody else's from both teams on that pitch yesterday. And I thought Sema was probably going to give you he had how many crosses did he put in that just, I don't know how Watford did not get a head or a toe to that ball. I mean, he deserved something out of this game there, Sema. Sema was dynamic. He was brilliant. Look, again, one of the candidates for player of the season for Watford. Sema did a tremendous job last night, but he didn't get any help. He put, how many balls did he put across that line that didn't get poked in? Rajovic didn't poke one in. I mean, you could look at a number of times crosses whistling through in front of the rookery, and where were the players running to it? I didn't see that kind of effort coming from these players as I had in previous games. So look, Watford really victimized themselves last night. That Ipswich got that second goal really from a defensive mistake. Speaking of victimizing themselves, Wesley Hood, who did not have a good game last night, had been so excellent throughout this season. This really was the first horrible game that he had. His crosses and passes were off all night long. I don't know what it was. I'm not even looking for reasons at this point. The fact is, sometimes you can just have an off night. And unfortunately for Wesley Hood, this was the night for him to have one. He'd been brilliant. He'd won you a game a couple of weeks ago at Hull City. But tonight he lost you a game. In this game last night, he lost you a game. It's not all his fault because the Watford defending was poor to begin with in this game. But this was a mistake that really was all his own. It wasn't because of anyone giving him a horrible back pass. Kayembe passed the ball back to him. And for whatever reason, Wesley Hood, whatever, he took his eye off of it or whatever. The fact is, I don't care what the reason is. You cannot be so sloppy in that situation. This is a player who we know is capable of doing good things. Even in this game, he has some good interceptions, but very uncharacteristic from West Hood. And the ball, I don't know what he did. It just did not come off for him. He did not control the ball properly. It wasn't a bad pass from Kayembe. Kayembe put the ball back to him just like he would do any other day of the week. But for some reason, West Hood did not get a handle on things. And in came Ipswich pouncing and scoring. And it was that easy. But that's how vulnerable Watford's defense was all night last night. Ipswich, as I said earlier, gave you plenty of warning signs. And like the game against Hull, when the Hull goalkeeper was coming under fire and was really getting let off and was having some near misses and all this stuff, and Watford eventually punished him. This is exactly what happened to us last night in the vein of Ipswich, as Ipswich eventually punished us for these mistakes. You cannot make these defensive mistakes and expect that a team is not going to put you away. And a team like Ipswich, you can't get away with that with. Now, you can get away with that with maybe a Queen's Park Rangers or a Rotherham, but an Ipswich town that's top of the table at the minute, at least as I'm recording this, you can't get away with it with them. And they punished you. They hurt you. I think Watford last night were guilty of being naive in the game. I really do. In terms of game management, they were naive there. It's a familiar bugaboo for Watford. The men's first team just cannot seem to know how to consolidate a lead or at least manage out the 10 minutes after which they've scored. And you're never more vulnerable than when you score a goal. And Watford didn't pay attention to that axiom last night as they scored in the 12th minute, as I said, but they could not hold on for at least 15 to 20 more minutes to ride out to the halfway mark of that second half, or first half, rather, to the 30-minute mark, I should say, of that first half. And then you start to manage out the remaining 15 or so minutes of the half. See, that's the thing that Watford have to do better. They've got to manage the game better after they've scored. They've got to see. I don't have any problem with Watford going behind in a game, and I'm confident that Watford, especially at home, can find the way to get back into a game. We saw that on Saturday against Southampton, so I'm not really concerned about them, say, going down 1-0 early in a game. They can come back. We've seen that before this season with West Brom, with Millwall, with Southampton, and with Norwich. All of those games Watford got points out of. But here's the thing. When Watford go in front in these games, particularly at home, but also on the road, Watford need to improve the way they game manage the next 10 to 15 minutes. They have to do that. They've not done it well a lot of times this season. You can go back to the game against Coventry, that wild 3-3 game. Wes Hurt put a ball in his own net that day, so he didn't have a good game there either. And Watford just scored against Coventry, could not get a foothold to platform that game, and Coventry kept pegging them back after every time. And that really is an issue for Watford, their defense and the way they're game managing after they've scored these goals. It happened against Hull, as I said, a number of times. In a number of different places on social media where Watford scored first, Hull would peg them back within a minute and a half. We've seen this over and over. Watford have to get that part of their game correct. Now, look, the performance I thought was good, again, except for the end product and the defending, but the approach, I should say, was very good as well. The Watford approach to the game, the ball movement, the way that they moved at the pitch and the movement of the ball and moving it quickly, the tempo was right. I think Watford controlled the tempo of this game very well. But again, it's a game management. It's that mentality to manage a game in phases. You can't manage the whole thing at once. You've got to take it in chunks. You can't press every minute. And I really wish Watford pressed more last night, but you can't press every minute. You've got to know when to press. You've got to sense the vulnerability of that defense and that goalkeeper, and you've got to press them. Watford pressed a little bit last night, but not often enough for me. And you have to have the right kinds of players pressing. There was a very telling moment late in the game. Bio tried to press the goalkeeper. He pressed him, and Bio wanted some support. He's telling his teammates, come on, help press with me. And they didn't press with him. And that's not good. That's not good. Now, that was late in the game, and I know people complain about the subs being made late. And yeah, Watford made the subs a little bit late. I think what happened was Val was confident in the group he had, and he wanted to wait a little bit later until either Watford scored or Ipswich scored. Now, for me, when Ipswich scored, that's when he put them on. I thought that was a bit late. What I want to see from Val, and he's been excellent with the subs for the most part this season. There have been one or two times where we've talked about the subs patterns, but lately, the last 10 games, his sub pattern has been much better. But what I would have really wanted from Val last night would have been to see him be more proactive about the substitutes. When the game is in the balance at 1-1, and it had been for quite a long time, you need to bring an extra bit of energy and life, because I think the game got a little stagnant. Watford had warning signs put on them, and they also gave Ipswich a number of warning signs. They just couldn't get over the line, Sema whipping those balls in, and nobody could put them home. You needed to get someone on that pitch who had a little bit more in them at that point. I don't know if it was because the lads were tired or what, but I think that you needed just another player on that pitch or two that would have given you something. Ince to me did not liven up the proceedings when he came on. I think he was a bit wooden last night for some whatever reason. And the bottom line for me is that the subs need to be more proactive in these situations. Now, you can't do this every game, but you have to have a sense of the possibility of the game. It's Ipswich Town. You played better than them for the most part last night. Your performance was good, except for the things I've talked about. You need to have one or two players who can give you a little something different. I think what we needed last night was a bit of quality to unlock a game like this. I think that's what the game cried out for. I think Watford could have done that if they had put these subs on earlier, but it didn't quite come off for them. And by the time Ipswich scored the second goal, I think the die was cast. I think Watford heads dropped a little bit there last night. But the bottom line for me is that Watford's game management and defending have got to be better, especially in these phases of play and in transition. When you've scored a goal, you've got to be able to know how you're going to approach locking down the next 10 minutes. If you're going to suffer, are you going to suffer for the next 10, 15 minutes, especially if you're away from home? Watford play Preston next, up in Preston, in Lancashire. Are you going to suffer for 10, 15 minutes? Are you going to defend deep, or are you going to come out And I think Watford are a little bit reticent last night. They defended a bit too deep. And, you had Ben Hamer and you had Livermore screaming at the players to come up the pitch more. They didn't do that. I don't think they got the defensive sets right. They didn't get that right last night. They did not get the spacing correct. Jamal Lewis has got, as I said earlier, going to be much, much tighter on these players. You cannot give them 10 feet. You cannot give them 10, 15 feet of space. You're letting the player get into the box. What you need to do there, Jamal Lewis, or anyone else, not just Jamal Lewis, but Jamal Lewis was the left back. You cannot let that player run into your 18-yard box. You've got to pressure him to give up that ball. So then you got some help defenders who can come across and help out wherever that ball is going to be distributed to. You cannot let that guy run into your box like that, because once you've got him and you've let him come in on his left foot, because that Ipswich player, I forget his name, his stronger foot was his left. Jamal Lewis sat off him and allowed him to come in and take a shot with his left foot. You know these players, you scouted them, you've done training against them, training on them, you know who they are. You've got to let that player go on his weaker right foot. Take him to the outside, take him further away toward the touchline, and then you can clog up the middle. You can get a double, you can get a second help defender to help you, or you can force that player to give up the ball early. That's what you really want to do there. But Jamal Lewis, let him come in and in and in. And when you do that, you're going to have a deeper defense, because then you're going to force players to scramble over and you're going to leave gaps. And that's what happened last night. And Ipswich made it real, real easy. There's the thing about this game that will really will get me and a lot of other Watford supporters, I think, and some of the lads, the Watford lads in that dressing room, is that this game was there to be had. Ipswich were there to be had last night. Watford did not do it, because I think this was largely self-inflicted from Watford. But in that, even there's a silver lining, because as good as Ipswich have been this season, they weren't great last night. We made them that way, and yet we still lost this game. Now, there are growing pains, and this team is going to have growing pains. It is having them. It's evolving. The performances are better. There's just things in each game, at some points, in some of these games at least, that need to be cleaned up just a bit more. And last night, certainly, it was game management, and certainly last night, it was the defensive intensity. Didn't see enough of that. Didn't see enough of that pushing up. They defended too deep. There was too much space. And I think a lot of that has to do with the mentality of switching on and also being more committed. I think they also showed, as I said earlier, they showed Ipswich way too much respect last night. And I think that's another thing. Ipswich could probably feel very lucky that they got out of there with 3 points. Not to say that they didn't deserve the 3 points, because I actually think Ipswich did deserve the 3 points, because they weren't naive. I think Watford were last night, and that cost them, as did that cruel, cruel mistake from West Hood. This has been the YouOrns 10-minute take.